In the morning at a mining site, there were several men who were prisoners. One of the men was John Rambo. He spent his days as a stone miner while a prisoner. John Rambo obeyed whatever the police told him to do. Soon the guard called Rambo to meet someone. It turned out that a man was John Rambo's superior in the past. Then Colonel Trotman said that he asked John for help running a secret mission in Vietnam. The colonel said that he would also be released from prison. Even Rambo was free from all the charges he got. At first, Rambo refused the order. But after knowing that his mission was very honorable, which was to save prisoners, Rambo finally agreed to Colonel Trotman's offer. Then Rambo went to the headquarters in Thailand. When he arrived at the headquarters, there was a mercenary named Eric. He welcomed Rambo's arrival. However, Rambo didn't seem to care about Eric. Then the colonel introduced a man named Murdoch to Rambo. Murdoch was the leader in this mission. After that, Murdoch saw the file when Rambo was a soldier. He was amazed to see that Rambo received many awards. Murdoch then explained that Rambo's mission was to photograph the enemy headquarters. Rambo was also not allowed to make armed contact with Vietnamese soldiers. After the conversation, Murdoch gave Rambo 1 hour to get ready for Vietnam. However, Colonel Trotman took Rambo on a tour of the headquarters. Rambo was surprised to see the sophisticated equipment and advanced technology inside the headquarters. Then Murdoch arrogantly said that Rambo would be safe under their guard because they have very sophisticated tools and technology. But Rambo casually said that he believed the best weapon was the human mind and brain itself. Hearing that, Murdoch was a little upset. But the colonel assured him that Rambo was a great soldier and was not afraid of death. An hour passed. Rambo prepared to leave for Vietnam. Before that, John prepared himself and also the weapons he would carry, such as knives, arrows, and pistols. He also brought a camera to take pictures of the enemy headquarters. The colonel then accompanied him to the plane. Rambo looked nervous to return to Vietnam, where his comrades in arms died there. Meanwhile, Murdoch again doubted Rambo. He did not believe that Rambo could find the prisoners. Shortly thereafter, Rambo received an order to jump because the location point was close. Unfortunately, when he was about to jump, the equipment that Rambo was carrying was caught in the airplane. This made him swayed by the wind. Eric then reported the incident to headquarters. Hearing that, Murdoch ordered Eric to cancel the mission. Rambo didn't hear that, but he tried to remove his equipment using a knife. He reluctantly left his weapon on the plane. A few moments later, Rambo managed to jump safely. He immediately explored the location. Rambo didn't have any trouble finding his way in the jungle because he was familiar with the Vietnamese jungle. Rambo then saw a suspicious woman. He then arrested her. The woman was called Co Bao. Co Bao quickly said that she was Rambo's partner in this mission. Hearing this explanation, Rambo believed the woman. Co Bao then invited Rambo to walk through the water route, which was through the river. She said that the land route was not safe. After walking for a while, they arrived at a village in the forest. Rambo was surprised to know that Co Bao rented a pirate ship to get to the enemy's location. Then a man from the village escorted them to the ship. Seeing that, Rambo was still worried if there was a ship operation by the Vietnamese army. But the man from the village said that he could use a bazooka against them. Hearing that, Rambo was a little relieved. While waiting to reach the location, Rambo and Co Bao talked. Rambo asked how Co Bao could participate in this dangerous mission. Then Co Bao explained that his father was a person who worked in intelligence. Co Bao replaced his father's duties because it turned out that his father had died. Co Bao then asked how Rambo could participate in this mission. Rambo casually replied that he could be sacrificed. In other words, if he died, no one would be looking for him. In another place at headquarters, Trotman asked about Rambo's retrieval. But Murdoch didn't seem to believe that Rambo had survived because until then, Rambo didn't contact the headquarters. However, Colonel Trotman forced Murdoch to still pick up Rambo. Murdoch reluctantly agreed and included Colonel Trotman as one of the members who picked up Rambo. Back to Rambo and Co Bao. It was late afternoon and they finally arrived at the location where the Vietnamese military prisoner camp was located. Co Bao then told the pirates to wait for the two of them. Not long after, they walked through the jungle and found the camp. They thought that the camp was empty. To ensure this, Rambo and Kobau wanted to look closer at the camp. When they arrived at the gate, they realized that the place was not empty, but many Vietnamese soldiers were on guard. Rambo then prepared a weapon to enter the place. Kobau, who knew Rambo's plan, told him to stay away. Kobau said that Rambo's mission was only to take pictures of the prisoner camp. However, Rambo didn't just want to take pictures, but he also wanted to free the prisoners. Rambo told Kobau to wait for him outside. Meanwhile, Rambo would sneak in. Rambo slowly but surely entered the dangerous place. Rambo was very good at hiding without being noticed by the enemies. While sneaking, Rambo also counted the soldiers who were there. After a while, Rambo walked through the military prisoner camp. He finally found the place where the American military were. Rambo carefully approached them. Rambo planned to free them. But after seeing the American prisoners dying, Rambo finally decided to free one of the prisoners who was tied up outside the prison. Rambo easily untied the man. However, their escape was quite difficult because the Vietnamese soldiers patrolled at night. Seeing that, Rambo prepared to finish off the soldiers. Armed with a knife, Rambo was able to silently kill several soldiers. Meanwhile, outside the camp, a soldier already knew that Kobau was hiding there. Fortunately, when Kobau was about to be executed, Rambo came and killed the soldier. In the morning, a Vietnamese soldier found the body of his comrade. Then one of the soldiers blew a long whistle, which signaled that there was an intruder. This made the Vietnamese soldiers gather to look for Rambo. Meanwhile, Rambo didn't want to waste time to escape. Kobau and the prisoner that Rambo freed made their way to the pirate ship on the riverbank. After a while of anxious walking, they arrived at the riverbank. They quickly boarded the ship and escaped. Shortly after they escaped, the Vietnamese soldiers saw footprints in the mud. They then rushed to the riverbank. In the distance, they saw a ship where Rambo and Kobau were. Then a lieutenant named Lieutenant Tay immediately contacted the headquarters for help. Meanwhile, at the American headquarters in Thailand, Colonel Trotman and other soldiers prepared to pick up Rambo in Vietnam. However, Rambo was in trouble. It turned out that the pirates who rented out their ship to Rambo had set him up. They reported Rambo so that the Vietnamese ship came to the pirate ship. Rambo initially just kept quiet to see them patronize him. Soon Rambo attacked the pirate with his small knife. He then ordered Kobau and the prisoner he had rescued to swim to the riverbank. Rambo chose to face the Vietnamese soldiers by himself. He remembered that there was a bazooka on the ship, so he fired it at the Vietnamese soldier's ship until it exploded. When Rambo was about to escape, one of the pirates captured Rambo from the pirate ship. Luckily, Rambo managed to kill the man and jumped off the ship. Rambo continued his journey to the pickup point with Kobau and a prisoner. On the way, he chose to part ways with Kobau. Before Rambo left, Kobau said that Rambo was not sacrificed. Hearing that, Rambo was silent and immediately continued his journey through the rice fields. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Tay managed to find Rambo's whereabouts. He immediately ordered other soldiers to shower Rambo with mortars. Soon Colonel Trotman and some hired mercenaries arrived by helicopter. Seeing their arrival, Rambo was very happy. Colonel Trotman was also proud of Rambo because he saved a prisoner. The mercenaries even managed to kill many Vietnamese soldiers just by shooting them from afar. Rambo took this as an opportunity. He rushed to the top of the hill. Colonel Trotman shared this good news with Murdoch. Instead of being happy, Murdoch ordered the mercenaries in the helicopter to cancel the pickup mission. Colonel Trotman was furious. He tried to lower the ladder so that Rambo could climb into the helicopter. Sadly, Eric pointed a gun at him, which made him unable to do anything. Rambo had no idea what was going on inside the helicopter. He only realized that they never lowered the ladder for him, until finally the helicopter just left Rambo. This made the Vietnamese soldiers come and surround Rambo. Seeing that, Rambo just surrendered. Meanwhile, it turned out that Kobau was still near the hill. She watched with her own eyes that Rambo was completely ignored. At the headquarters in Thailand, Colonel Trotman was angry with Murdoch, who ordered to cancel the pickup. Murdoch explained that Rambo had disobeyed his orders. Rambo should have only photographed the prisoner camp without saving any. Murdoch was afraid that if the people knew Rambo saved a prisoner, then the people would ask for compensation for the damage in Vietnam during the war. Hearing that, Colonel Trotman was getting angry because he thought that the prisoners were defending the country, but the country considered them dead. Murdoch didn't respond to the colonel's words. Instead, he sent him away. Before Colonel Trotman left, he said that Murdoch had made a big mistake in dealing with Rambo. Rambo, who was arrested by the Vietnamese army, then tied up and put in pig manure. A short time later, a helicopter belonging to the Russian army arrived. The Russian soldier was led by Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky. He then scared Rambo with the knife he was carrying. Seeing Rambo, who was not afraid at all, made Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky challenged. He ordered the Vietnamese soldiers to clean Rambo from pig manure. After that, Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky interrogated Rambo. He wanted to know a lot about the American army. He also told Rambo to call his headquarters. Rambo was silent and looked at him sharply. This made Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky angry. He ordered his subordinate named Yushin to torture Rambo so that he would speak. In the evening, Ko Bao came to the prisoner camp. She disguised herself as a prostitute hired by the Vietnamese army. Meanwhile, Rambo continued to be tortured by Yushin with electric shocks. Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky ordered Yushin to continue torturing him mercilessly until Rambo surrendered. Rambo still remained firm in his stance. He refused to talk or betray his country. This made Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky upset. Then he managed to intercept the conversation when Rambo was captured. He said that Rambo had been deliberately left behind on direct orders from the mission leader, Murdoch, but Rambo stayed firm on his stance. Seeing that, Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky ordered Yushin to shock Rambo with high voltage until the lights flickered. Then Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky ordered his subordinates to bring the prisoner who was freed by Rambo. Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky threatened Rambo that if he didn't speak, the prisoner would be wounded by a hot knife. The prisoner told Rambo to shut up, even if he had to die. Meanwhile, Ko Bao managed to kill one of the Vietnamese soldiers. She then took Rambo's weapons. Ko Bao then slowly searched for Rambo's whereabouts, until finally Ko Bao managed to find where Rambo was kept. She saw Rambo, who surrendered. Rambo could not bear to see the prisoner being tortured. He then contacted the headquarters. Then Murdoch answered Rambo. Rambo angrily said that he would come to him and kill him. Rambo initially did not realize that Ko Bao was spying from below, but when Rambo looked at the floor, Rambo realized that Ko Bao was coming. Rambo quickly hit Yushin and shot the people in the room. The Vietnamese soldiers heard the shootout. They then approached where Rambo was. Seeing this, Rambo quickly finished off the soldiers who were in front of his sight. Then Rambo and Ko Bao escaped by throwing grenades. He then forcibly opened the iron fence and ran. Rambo and Ko Bao ran as far as possible, but they realized that the Vietnamese soldiers were getting more and more. They didn't let Rambo get away with it. The Vietnamese soldiers decided to send a helicopter to light up the jungle. Shortly after that, they managed to find Rambo and Ko Bao. Luckily, Rambo and Ko Bao managed to avoid the gunfire. When morning came, the Vietnamese and Russian soldiers finally chose to retreat back to their headquarters. Ko Bao, who saw that, was very relieved. She then treated Rambo's wounds. At the American Army headquarters in Thailand, Murdoch was still thinking about Rambo's threat. He was afraid of Rambo's words. A few minutes later, Colonel Trotman came to him. He requested that the mercenaries would be ready in 1 hour to pick up Rambo, but Murdoch refused Colonel Trotman's request. Hearing this, Colonel Trotman decided to pick up Rambo himself. Unfortunately, he was intercepted by the mercenaries there. Meanwhile, Rambo was touched by the sincerity of Ko Bao, who dared to take dangerous risks to save him. It appeared that Ko Bao fell in love with Rambo. So did Rambo, who began to love the lady. Then Ko Bao asked Rambo to take her to America with him. Ko Bao promised to faithfully accompany Rambo until the end of his life. Hearing that, Rambo felt happy. Rambo decided to take Ko Bao back to America with him after the mission was over. After treating Rambo's wounds, Ko Bao stood up to prepare to leave. But Vietnamese soldiers shot Ko Bao brutally until she died. Rambo, who saw the woman he loved was killed, made him angry. He then shot the Vietnamese soldiers to death. Rambo then buried Co Bao's body. He didn't want to drown in sadness. He immediately prepared to take revenge on the Vietnamese and Russian soldiers. Rambo walked slowly but surely towards the Vietnamese soldiers who were looking for him. He finished off the Vietnamese soldiers one by one with his bare hands. He also sometimes killed with a knife or his favorite weapon, the arrow, so that it didn't make a sound. The Russian army was also confused to see one by one its members disappear without a trace because Rambo managed to kill them. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese and Russian soldiers did not find Rambo's whereabouts. Then Rambo continued his revenge mission for the death of Co Bao. Eventually, Rambo decided to appear in front of the soldiers. He planned to trap them to follow wherever Rambo went. Rambo kept running and entered a village. He then took a chicken and a jerry can of kerosene. Rambo then continued his journey towards a sugarcane farm. The soldiers who saw him decided to spread out in search of Rambo. Russian and Vietnamese soldiers found bloodstains on the plantation. They thought it was Rambo's blood, so they followed it, until they finally saw no more blood anywhere. They didn't find Rambo, but a dead chicken and an empty jerry can. They were surprised because it turned out to be chicken blood instead of Rambo's blood. Meanwhile, Rambo from a distance saw the soldiers in his trap. He immediately lit a fire and put it on the kerosene he had spread on the plantation. The Vietnamese and Russian soldiers ended up dying silly deaths in the farm. Rambo then went up the hill and exploded the soldiers' cars. After he finished making a mess, he then went towards the waterfall to escape. But there was Lieutenant Tay at the waterfall. He tried to shoot Rambo dead. Sadly, the shot kept resetting and the bullets ran out. He took a gun and shot at Rambo, but he failed once again. Then Rambo decided to shoot Lieutenant Tay. He remembered that it was Lieutenant Tay who killed Co Bao. At last, Lieutenant Tay died in Rambo's hands. Then Rambo decided to leave the waterfall right away. However, he heard a helicopter coming. It turned out to be a Russian helicopter piloted by Yashin. Yashin irritably bombed the waterfall. Rambo luckily managed to jump into the water to avoid being hit by the fire. Yashin, who knew that Rambo survived, then told his men to shoot at the water to kill Rambo. Unexpectedly, Rambo was able to attack the shooter and get into the helicopter. Rambo then faced off against Yashin. In the beginning, Rambo was exhausted by Yashin because his body was much bigger than Rambo. But Rambo became increasingly angry. Through his anger, Rambo managed to defeat Yashin. Rambo then hijacked the helicopter and headed to where the prisoners were. He then bombed the place brutally. At first, the Vietnamese and Russian soldiers didn't realize that it was Rambo. Moments later, they tried to shoot the helicopter, but they were not prepared for Rambo. Soon, Rambo managed to destroy the place. He then got down and rescued the prisoners. Seeing Rambo coming, they were very happy. They didn't think that Rambo could fight the Vietnamese and Russian soldiers. Rambo quickly told them to get into the helicopter. But it turned out that Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky pretended to be dead while he was watching Rambo. Meanwhile, Rambo did not realize that Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky still survived. He then took the prisoners to the headquarters in Thailand. On the way, Rambo heard that a helicopter was following him. The helicopter was apparently driven by Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky. He tried to make Rambo's helicopter crash. Seeing that, Rambo couldn't attack him because the position of Rambo's helicopter was in front. However, the prisoners managed to kill Podolsky's men. Until a few moments later, Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky was surprised that Rambo's helicopter was not in front of him. He was very aware of the sudden attack. Unfortunately, he was unable to avoid Rambo. Suddenly, Rambo's helicopter appeared in front of Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky. Rambo remembered that there was a bazooka on the helicopter. Then Rambo shot Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky's helicopter with a bazooka until it exploded. So did Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky, who was killed by the explosion. Rambo tried to fly the helicopter, which was damaged, which caused smoke. He then contacted the headquarters in Thailand. Rambo said that he had successfully rescued the prisoners and he would return to the base. The soldiers at the base were very happy to hear the happy news. Colonel Trotman was also happy. Meanwhile, Murdoch was getting scared because Rambo was coming. He still remembered about Rambo's threat at that time. Rambo then asked the soldiers for help to prepare for an emergency landing, as some of the prisoners were injured. Moments later, Rambo managed to land the almost damaged helicopter safely. The medics arrived and helped the wounded prisoners. Meanwhile, Rambo went directly to find Murdoch's whereabouts. He brought a gun to meet the man. The colonel who saw Rambo was very angry, could only watch from afar. Then Rambo shot into a room full of sophisticated equipment that Murdoch was proud of. After that, Rambo went to Murdoch, who was sitting silently in fear. Rambo seemed to hate him. He then beat him brutally. After Rambo finished with Murdoch, he went back outside the headquarters. The colonel was very proud of Rambo. He said that Rambo would get another award. Instead, Rambo told the colonel to give the award to the captured soldiers. The colonel then offered Rambo to return to the military with him. On hearing that, Rambo refused because he remembered that many of his comrades in arms died during the war with Vietnam. The colonel didn't want to force Rambo's decision. He finally asked what Rambo really wanted. Rambo firmly wanted the country to love the soldiers as much as the soldiers loved their country. After his conversation with Colonel Trotman, Rambo decided to leave and continued his life.